All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to call this meeting of the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District Governing Board meeting to order. The date is February 15th, and the time is 9:03 in the morning.
We're late.
That was, I know, we're always late when I start a meeting. So we have board members participating in person and at our office in Fresno, Bakersfield, and Modesto. We will do our best to facilitate a smooth meeting with public participation via Zoom and webcast. Before we begin, here are some important guidelines and general instructions for the meeting. Please silence your other communication devices such as your cell phone. During the meeting, all public participants will be placed on mute by the host. Public members will not be able to mute or unmute manually. Audio for members of the public will be unmuted once they are recognized to make a public comment. After each agenda item, the chair will announce the public comment and the clerk will recognize any public attendees who have indicated they wish to speak. Now, we're gonna do roll call and then chair's prerogative, if you could. We do have a new member and I'm gonna give her a chance after the roll call to introduce herself and tell us a little bit about herself. So roll call, please.
Okay, Mr. Couch?
Here.
Ms. Escutia Brayton? Ms. Lewis?
Here.
Mr. McCauley?
Here.
Mr. Mendez?
Here.
Dr. Pacheco Warner? Mr. Pereira?
Here.
Mr. Preciado? Mr. Reyna? Mr. Rickman? Mr. Robinson?
Here.
Dr. Sheriff?
Here.
Ms. Shiklian? Here. Ms. Nguyen? Here. Mr. Chiesa?
Here.
To the chair, we have a quorum.
Perfect. And to my right, and I think it's your left online, we have Elizabeth Nguyen. She goes by Liz. I could continue to call you Liz, but welcome very much. If you want to let the audience know a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, thank you. My name is Elizabeth Liz Nguyen, and I serve on the Visalia City Council, and I'm excited to be here. I have my full-time job that pays my bills. Is I am the Charitable Foundation Director for Cahuilla Health, largest public district healthcare in California. So thank you so much for this opportunity. And I look forward to getting to know each of you better. Thank you.
And for the public, she is replacing Drew Bessinger, who was termed out Clovis City Council member. So great to have you. And I think I already told you, stick with it. You're going to find this to be a very rewarding experience. And as a public health agency, there's a lot of good to be done in the Valley to help people out. Okay, I'm going to ask everyone to please stand. And today I'm going to ask Member McCauley to lead us in the pledge, if you wouldn't mind. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move on to the approval of the consent calendar, which are items 14 through 20 in your board packet. Are there any board members that would like to comment on any items? There not. Anyone from the public?
Do we have any public comments in Bakersfield?
No public comment in Bakersfield. However, Mr. Reyna has arrived.
Thank you. Do we have any public comments in Modesto?
No public comment in Modesto.
Thank you. Do we have any members of the public in Fresno that would like to comment on the consent calendar? Seeing none and none online.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion
Second.
and a second.
Okay, I'll call roll. Mr. Couch?
Yes.
Ms. Lewis?
Yes. Yes.
Mr. McCauley?
Yes.
Mr. Mendez?
Yes.
Mr. Pereira?
Aye.
Mr. Reyna?
Aye.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
Dr. Sheriff?
Yes.
Ms. Shiklian?
Aye.
Ms. Nguyen?
Yes.
Mr. Chiesa?
Aye.
To the chair, motion passes.
Thank you very much. On to item 5. It's a public comment period. It's an opportunity for anyone to speak on any matter that is not on today's posted agenda. We limit your time to 3 minutes. I always have to remember that because every board I'm on has a different time limit. And you will be called on and unmuted by the clerk when your time comes. Is there any public comment?
Do we have any members of the public in Bakersfield that would like to comment?
No members of the public in Bakersfield.
Thank you. Modesto, do you have any members of the public that would like to comment?
No public comment in Modesto.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public in Fresno that would like to comment? I do have one approaching.
Want me to identify myself, or?
Yeah, please.
My name is Robert Skorowski, and I live in Fresno County.
Welcome, Robert.
Okay, I'd like to make 2 comments. First comment is the plug-in rebate program, I guess, has run out of money. And I hope you guys continue it, because I think it gives incentive for people to buy a vehicle that's electric. The other comment I was going to make is, I was talking to the administrator. Why don't you also give the rebate to used vehicles? Because basically, people usually don't have as much money as buying a new vehicle, but yet the goal is the same, because if they drive their electric vehicle, it's the same as driving a new electric vehicle. So maybe they should be offered the rebate also. That's the end of my public comment.
Thank you very much for coming in today, Robert.
Thank you. Do we have any other members of the public in Fresno that would like to comment? Seeing none and no online comments.
I'm going to allow our
Yeah,
executive director.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, board members, and welcome to Councilmember Nguyen. Yeah, just a quick response. We did see some very high demand in the Drive Clean and the San Joaquin rebate program that the gentleman was asking about. In fact, we expended about $20 million this last fiscal year in that program, close to 30 million actually over the calendar year. So we actually saw, which shows actually a rapid increase over this last year. We do plan on funding that program in the coming fiscal year. So as the board hears the budget that's being prepared right now in the coming couple of months, there'll be some discussion about that. We do intend on funding that program into the next fiscal year as well. And I also wanted to note that we have another component of the program that is live. I know board members are very active on supporting that program, but it's through our event model as well as through the online portal, where you can actually, it could be a new vehicle, actually could also be a used vehicle, but it's really focused on our underserved communities. And there's quite a bit of funding available to help you get into a plug-in vehicle as well through that program. So I just wanted to note that that is active right now and is funded. And then we also do plan on putting even more money into that program. It's only program actually left on the rebate side. The state has moved away from issuing those rebates. And so, we've been a good source of support for residents as they've considered transitioning to those vehicles. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that update on. So we're going to move on. If there's nothing else, we're going to move on to item number 6, which is accept and appropriate $56,008,096 in federal funding for the development of an electric vehicle charging network in the San Joaquin Valley. Todd.
Good morning. Mr. Chair, members of the board. Again, my name is Todd DeYoung, your grants program director. And so just by way of a very brief background, wanted to discuss a little bit of the importance of mobile source emission reductions here in the Valley. As you know, mobile sources account for a majority of the NOx and ozone issues here in the Valley, and that includes toxic diesel PM emissions. So reducing those emissions from mobile sources, which include heavy duty vehicles, light duty vehicles, it's a critical component to our strategy to attain federal health-based air quality standards. And with 45% of California truck traffic occurring within the San Joaquin Valley, these emission reductions are critical in improving regional air quality and improving the lives of Valley residents. As such, your board has long advocated for developing, demonstrating, and deploying all of the cleanest feasible technologies. And that includes battery electric, hydrogen, and other rapidly developing technologies throughout the Valley. So it's not a one-size-fits-all, it's a menu-based approach, and your board has been very active in looking at all of these strategies to reduce emissions from mobile sources. So in keeping with those board priorities, as part of the federal bipartisan infrastructure law, the FHWA, the Federal Highway Administration, Charging and Fueling Infrastructure, or CFI program, was created to deploy publicly accessible electric vehicle charging. Over $2.5 billion was allocated to this program over 5 years. And it's really targeted at deploying EV charging and zero emission fueling infrastructure. And there's a particular focus in this program in underserved and disadvantaged communities, such as many communities here in the San Joaquin Valley. So in keeping with that, on June 13th of last year, the district submitted a proposal in response to this highly competitive nationwide solicitation. In this proposal, we proposed to partner with a California-based company called Watt EV to develop 2 state-of-the-art charging sites along what's been designated the National Freight Corridor, the Interstate 5 corridor throughout the valley. The 2 sites that were chosen, and I'll go into a little bit more detail about the 2 sites and why they were chosen, but they're near the town of Taft in Kern County along I-5, and then near the town of Gustine in Merced County, also along the I-5 corridor. And again, this corridor, the I-5 corridor and the National Freight Corridor, was identified by the federal government as one of the nation's busiest freight corridors. So identifying opportunities to reduce emissions along this corridor are absolutely critical. So I'm happy to report that just about a month ago, the FHWA announced that the district received full funding for our project in the amount of $56,008,096. This includes about $54.3 million in project costs and about $1.7 million for project administration, data collection, and all the associated reporting that goes along with these types of federal grants. The total project cost is about $73.5 million. And includes about $19.2 million in match funding from Watt EV. So they're contributing significantly to this project as well, as the primary project partner. It's important to note that there's no district match that was proposed or included in this project. So no district funding is going into this. It's all federal funding, and then the match funding coming from the project partner. We were among 47 applicants across 22 states that received funding. And I'm happy to report that this award was the largest in California and the 3rd largest in the entire country under this particular solicitation. So why these locations? So we understand that the Interstate 5 connects to a series of east-west highways that really draw all of the truck traffic from all the farming communities and all of the communities in California, the Central Valley, to the ports. I-5 is the main connection to the port of Oakland in the north and the ports of LA, Long Beach, and San Diego in the south. So that connection point is critical as we talk about cleaning up fleets of trucks, particularly from some of our smaller communities, and drawing those to I-5 to then go either north or south to those ports. These 2 particular sites, again, one of them is along the Taft Highway in Kern County, right at the junction of I-5 and State Route 119, and then near the town of Gustine, State Route 140 and I-5 right there at the junction in Merced County. And again, this creates these important goods movement juncture points where trucks not only traveling through the district from north to south will have the opportunity to stop and do some mid-trip refueling, but it also allows goods movement coming out of the valley and going to these ports an opportunity to charge on their way either north or south. So a little bit more information about the Taft location. Again, it's located directly on I-5 at State Route 119. This provides direct access not only to Interstate 5, but also to Highway 99. It's immediately accessible at the off-ramp, providing ease of use for both personal electric vehicles as well as these mid-route electric trucks. Provides access to the city of Taft, which is about 19 miles to the east, and then also on Highway 119, it provides access to the major transportation and logistics hubs in Bakersfield. So the Taft location will include not only passenger vehicle charging, but heavy-duty truck vehicle charging as well. So it's going to include 45 passenger vehicle, what are called fast chargers, 9 commercial vehicle megawatt chargers. Now, these megawatt chargers provide much more of like a traditional gas station experience to the trucker. They can charge a truck in 30 to 40 minutes, depending on the state of charge when it gets there. So these are super fast chargers. It also includes 45 truck fast chargers, which are designed to be utilized in combination with like mandated rest periods at a truck stop. So they'll, take 6 to 8 hours to fully charge a truck. So if they're on their mandated rest period, they can be plugged in, charged up by the time that they're ready to go. Amenities at the site will include restrooms, free parking, and other amenities. There's plans for pads surrounding these locations where other amenities like restaurants could be located, and to kind of further serve those the patrons of these facilities. It has the capacity to serve about 24,000 trucks with the fast chargers and over 19,000 trucks annually, again with those megawatt chargers. Similarly, the Gustine location, chosen for much the same reason, much the same characteristics. It has that Highway 99 and Highway I-5, or excuse me, the I-5 access. It's less than a mile off of the I-5 on-ramp. Clear visibility to the site so folks can see it when they're traveling up and down I-5. It's located 5 miles from Gustine, which could provide local community support, workforce integration. There's going to be jobs available at these locations, and so they could pull from those local communities to serve these locations. And again, similarly, 45 passenger vehicle chargers, 8 commercial vehicle megawatt chargers, 40 heavy duty fast chargers. Again, 24/7 accessibility, same sorts of amenities here as in the Taft location. So what's critical and really innovative about these projects, and it's something that your board has been extremely interested in and active in recently, is grid integration and grid stability. We all understand that the electric grid in California needs bolstering if we're going to achieve these goals of electrification. And your board has been extremely active in that space. And one of the key features of these sites is solar panels. Between the two sites, it includes a combined 63 acres of solar panels, as well as battery storage. So these solar panels are charging up these battery storage units and will allow a substantial amount of the electricity to be generated and stored on site and then used at times when the solar panels are not producing. And so upon completion, both of these sites will be able to charge more than 121,000 trucks. They have the capacity to charge more than 121,000 trucks utilizing that solar panels and that grid storage. Now, it's important to note that there is still grid integration that's necessary with these sites. That 100% of the electricity is not going to be generated on site, and these sites were chosen specifically for their grid integration capabilities. They're already have the ability to accept grid integration. They have the capacity on site already, and that's part of the reason that these sites were chosen. So a little bit about our primary project partner, Watt EV. Like I said, they're a California-based company. They're based in Long Beach, California, and they're responsible for a majority of the project deliverables. And that includes everything from site design, engineering, all the procurement, construction, development, and the ongoing operation and maintenance of these sites as well. Their stated mission is to accelerate the transition to zero-emission transportation within the heavy-duty trucking market specifically. And they're really focused on assisting particularly small fleets in the transition to electrification, which I'll discuss here in just a moment. They've spent the last 3 years launching and building out a corridor for heavy-duty electric vehicle refueling. They've got sites in Southern California that are under construction and have recently opened. They've been expanding in the valley. There's a site in Bakersfield already along the 99 that's due to open later this year. And so this is part of that bolstering of that refueling network that they're building all throughout California. And again, they utilize industry standards for vehicle charging. This is not proprietary charging technology. This is industry standard and would be available to all trucks depending on and vehicles, regardless of their make or manufacturer. What stands Watt EV apart is this, what they call trucks as a service model. Now, it's not part of this grant, but another part of what Watt EV does is they have a fleet of trucks that they own, and they basically lease these trucks to primarily small businesses to get them comfortable with electric vehicles and electric vehicle technology. They allow folks to integrate electric vehicles into their existing fleets without the huge capital outlay that would be associated with buying these trucks outright. That allows them to become comfortable with the technology. They have access to charging, maintenance. They've got these turnkey packages that they make available, and the pricing on these is very competitive to what a new diesel truck would be in terms of your monthly payments and your cost to operate these vehicles. So that's a great addition to this project, and it's part of the Watt EV business model. So just a little bit about the project budget, and we talked a little bit about it earlier. It's about $54.3 million in Federal Highway Administration funding that's directed towards all the equipment purchases and the construction, the engineering design, all that good stuff. Watt EV, again, will put in $19.2 million in match funding to administer the project, manage all the project activities, as well as operate the sites. GNA is a project partner in this. They're a leading North American consulting firm and really a market leader in the development of advanced transportation solutions. They'll be developing and assisting in the data collection and reporting for this grant. So about $1.7 million is available in total for grant administration. $1 million of that will come to the district for our work in overseeing the grant, coordinating all of the activities under the grant, and then providing all of the necessary reporting and data collection efforts. And then that $734,000 then would go to GNA for all of their activities under the grant. And so the project timeline, we're looking at about a 5-year total build out for this project. As you can see, the first budget period, which is really starting now, is all of the engineering, the environmental work, the civil work, all of the permitting. They've already been in contact with the utilities to plan for integrating all these sites into the existing utility structure. Budget period 2 is where a lot of the heavy work goes and a majority of the construction, and that lasts from second quarter of this year until first quarter of next year. So a lot of the majority of the construction will occur during that second budget period. Budget period 3 is where we really start to see the operations begin at these sites. So that's probably first quarter of 25 until 2027. And then that fourth budget period, we want to wrap everything up. We want to complete all of the reporting requirements. Everything will be up and running. The solar will be completely integrated into the sites, and we'll be fully up and running during that fourth and final budget period. And then at that point, the grant period is essentially over at that point. And so with that, the recommendations are before you. I won't read them. They're in your packet, but it's basically to accept the funding and allow us to start entering into contracts with the necessary parties. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
So I want to quickly ask a question, and it might be a comment, but I love this. I think the locations are fantastic. Middle, the two ends of the valley. They would be the right location to make it throughout the valley. So I think they've gone through a good thought process. Hydrogen, potential expansion into hydrogen, rather than citing another location, is there the potential to expand these locations? Because there's a vast amount of land. I know in Gustine, I can't speak to the other facility.
Yeah, I believe that there's absolutely an opportunity there. I believe that there is enough land around these particular locations so that you could co-locate a hydrogen facility on site and kind of make a one-stop shop for all zero emission fueling technologies. That's certainly something that we could talk about with Watt EV and other potential interested parties to co-locate.
And I don't know how much land that takes, but I know that economic development follows this. When you have truck stops, there's going to be restaurants and a hotel there. There's going to be other things that are going to just end up there because of the capacity. And you should save some space. And I don't know how much space it takes for hydrogen, but good planning. I found in my own business that you never think you're going to grow to a certain size, and so you put things close and you don't think it through. Here's an opportunity to think it through, because long term that might be the solution for trucks, heavy truck traffic.
Definitely.
Okay, so now we're going to go to the board, Vice Chair Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of questions. Have the sites been located already? Is the land designated already? So I'm particularly interested for the Gustine site. Is that going to be north of Gustine or south of Gustine between 152 and Interstate 5?
It is directly on the 140 and I-5
Okay.
interchange.
Okay.
Well, I should say it's not directly on that. It's about a mile east of I-5, less than a mile
Right.
east of I-5, but directly on 140.
Okay. All right.
East or west side of the freeway?
It'll be on the east side of the
East
freeway.
side, where there's two gas stations.
Right,
currently.
right.
Yeah.
Okay. Of the 63 acres that are designated, I assume that's for both sites.
Correct.
Do we know how many acres each site will be?
That's a great question, and I do not have the specific answer. I know there's more, I believe, in Gustine, and I think it was based on the availability of land in that particular parcel. I know it's not an even split
Yeah.
between the two, but the total is 63 acres, but I can certainly get you that split.
And for the grid integration to supply the energy, are there going to, I noticed that the Gustine site has less solar panels than the Taft site. So is there another agency that's going to be supplying energy to the sites, or at least to the Gustine site, other than just the solar panels that are indicated?
It would be the public utility. In this case, it would be likely PG&E. And they've already been in discussions with PG&E. They have the capacity out there. It will require some substation development, but it will be PG&E that would be supplying that.
So these projects won't be buying energy sources from other companies that may have a bunch of panels out there that are selling energies to either municipalities or private organizations.
It's my understanding that if it's not generated on site, then it would come from the utility.
Okay.
That's my understanding of the
Okay.
project.
I think those are the questions I have right now. I'm really happy to see this, and as I understand through the project that personal vehicles will be able to use this as well. So that's a positive. Oh, I know. Just for comparison, the fast chargers, which is 240 kilowatts, is that faster than like the Tesla chargers that are out there now?
It's equivalent.
It's equivalent.
Yeah, up
so
to
the mega chargers are the ones that are much faster.
the mega chargers for the trucks are significantly faster.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the fast chargers, is that going to be for trucks and cars, or just basically for cars?
There are designated for both. There are designated passenger vehicle fast chargers as well as truck fast chargers,
Okay.
as well as the truck mega chargers.
All right.
So there's three. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you,
Of course.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Member Chatelain?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Todd, where does the 99 rank on this federal highway corridor?
That's a good question. I don't know specifically. I know that it is included as part of it. In fact, the reason that these sites were chosen is because of their connectivity to the 99.
Which I was happy to see, because
Right.
I got when this first came out, press releases and whatnot, I had a couple of those questions, especially because they're talking about inland ports and whatnot now in the valley. I was happy to see that there is some connectivity. I don't know if the Gustine one is as connected as the Taft location, but just wanted to bring that up and see where it is.
It's a great question. I just want to also add that on the question of hydrogen as well, and other funding opportunities that we're looking at, and there is interest, and we're hopeful that we can actually put together support projects that also bring hydrogen into the valley. At the November board meeting, you heard from the Arches Coalition, the public-private partnership that has $1.2 billion recently allocated to them by the federal government. In that planning and in other planning, both the 5 and the 99 are identified as major freight corridors of interest and prioritized as areas that need to see more development in that context as well. So I just wanted to note that not only for this project, but I think for larger discussions that are going on, that both corridors are integral parts of addressing the freight challenges that we have.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Member Pereira?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, yeah, I'd like to thank Samir for your comments about the hydrogen fuel and echo Supervisor Chiesa's comments earlier. You know, I really believe that especially for freight movement, right? That makes sense to me. I do have a request of Todd, if it's possible. The company's Watt EV is going to put in these projects. And could we ask them if they would be willing to have a local office in Gustine and maybe one in Taft as well? And the reason why that's important, if they use that address in their purchases, the sales tax comes to Merced County and would go to Kern County. And we're going to bear the impacts going down the road, right? I know they're going to pay some impact fees up front, but down the road, we'll be responsible for maintaining some of the infrastructure. And so anyways, that would just be helpful to us.
Absolutely. I know that at least one of the locations does have office space slated in the design, and I'll find out which one. But I know that at least one of them has that. But we'll certainly pass that along to Watt EV as well for those tax implications.
Yeah. Well, that would be important before the construction starts, right? Because they'll be purchasing items, materials ahead of time. So, they could, I don't know if they can rent a PO box if it's that simple, but I know that we could help them find an office there in Gustine if, ahead of time, so that everything purchased would come through that address. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Preciado.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mine is more of a comment, but I remember when we had the study session in Modesto, this is separate from that project. I believe they were talking about a lot of infrastructure funding coming for EV and hydrogen filling stations that we need in the Central Valley. So I believe I mentioned before that we only have one hydrogen filling station in our area at Harris Ranch. But there's a lot of interest about, and we know that the problem is producing the hydrogen locally, so it's not imported into California. So I know there's some interest also near our area about a charging and hydrogen producing plant near the 5 and State Highway 269. Is there any way that like these companies can actually reach out to rural communities where the infrastructure is needed at a big range? Because like I said, our community is really getting those hydrogen cars, those Toyota's hydrogen cars, and they're really having problems filling those cars because sometimes that filling station, the Harris Ranch, is down, or they don't have the gas there. Deliveries are also, I guess, problematic sometimes. So is there any conversation with those companies and kind of helping those communities get the infrastructure needed? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. That's a great question. And we definitely agree that these projects are only successful when they're able to integrate themselves into communities. So earlier comments, the suggestion that was raised, and other comments along those lines are definitely very important, to be raised. I do want to just also agree with the point that for hydrogen, there's a number of challenges that all sort of have to be addressed. One of them is producing the hydrogen, and so there has been conversations. I think they're developing quickly, in terms of where in the valley, where in the state there could be hydrogen production facilities. I've heard of some near in that area. I've heard of some up north as well, some connected to some of the rail activity that's also happening in the northern part of the valley with the Valley Link project. And every one of those concepts, the production would not only satisfy the immediate need of whoever's putting the facility in place, because sometimes the first priority of the fuel will be to, say, serve rail or other equipment, but also to have a surplus of production that could be made available to either public facilities or just in direct contracts with fleets and other facilities. So we are actively discussing that with whoever may have that interest, and our comment to them will be definitely to work with the local community. I think these projects are only going to be successful if we get that support, if they integrate, not only with workforce and but also the comment that was raised earlier about taxes and fees and how to best sort of situate these projects to be integral parts of the community. So we can follow up a little bit more on that. I'd like to hear more about that project if there's anything we could be doing to support that. But we do see ourselves as a regional agency as playing a role in trying to support this transition, whether it's battery electric, whether it's hydrogen. We do think there's a lot of potential in the region. Happy to follow up with you on that. And sorry.
Member Mendez?
Yeah, you mentioned that I'm sure the partners is the one that's doing the permitting, talking to PG&E and so forth. But you said that there was a substation upgrade that needed to be done on both of these?
That's my understanding,
Yeah.
that there will be some infrastructure development that will be necessary as part of this. But the sites were chosen for the
Right.
capacity. The capacity is already there essentially.
Right,
It's just,
right.
yeah. But
Yeah.
there will be some necessary
I'm
development.
just saying that because some of the substation upgrades are taking 3 to 4 years to do. So-
Right. Yeah, no, that's a great point. And
Yeah.
and it's my understanding that these conversations with PG&E and the utilities have been ongoing for
Right.
a while now. So
So we could have everything done and still be waiting on PG&E for a little bit.
True. Very true.
Nothing new to anybody here.
Member McCauley?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just had a couple questions. First one is around the solar panels. It looks like the production on the solar panels is going to be nearly over twice as much as what's necessary for the capacity on what we can charge. So I'm just curious about how we settled on these solar panels, why we're putting so many in. And that's just based on the estimated number of trucks you can serve. So I mean, at each location, it looks like we can do 23,000 plus or minus trucks. But then the solar looks like it can serve 120,000 trucks. So I'm just, again, curious how we settled on how many solar panels we're putting in. And I'm assuming Watt EV is going to be profiting from putting some of this electricity back on the grid, or?
That's a great question. And I think these were estimates based on the total projected capacity, not necessarily, there's assumptions that these stations will be utilized only a certain percentage of the time, at least in the next couple of years as California transitions to more electric vehicles. I think they're planning for expanded capacity in the future, sort of overbuilding the system is kind of my understanding. And that also takes into account kind of that battery storage that you'd be able to generate a lot of that and then store it on site. My understanding is that there's not plans to sell that, that power back to the grid necessarily. It's really to store that on site and utilize as much of it as possible in the facility itself.
So they're not pulling anything off the grid?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And then I'm curious to know how long they're required to maintain this infrastructure and what they're required to provide and how long do we?
So the terms of the grant are 5 years.
Okay.
Obviously, with Watt EV providing a substantial amount of the match funding, they have a stake to ensure that this is an ongoing benefit to not only the Valley, but all of California. So we would expect those benefits, and we would expect this project to last, 20 plus years minimum.
Sure.
But the grant period itself is 5 years where they're required to report usage and all of those sorts of things, data collection, all those things. That's that 5 year period of time under the CFI grant.
Okay. And then lastly, are they expected to sell this power to people that are stopping in, or is it just free charging, or how does that work?
No, there will be a cost, and it's market based. And it will be market based at the time that this is up and running. So, 3 to 5 years from now, the power will be sold. They have plans to have multiple payment platforms. They've got their own system where you can scan a card and charge. But it will be market based, and there will be a cost to charge.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Member Robinson.
First, just my compliments to staff. That's quite a coup to attain a grant like this. My understanding is the third largest in the nation and the first largest in California. That's a lot of work. So thank you very much for that. Also, I know you mentioned 20 years, but what's the lifespan of a mega charger or something of that nature before they have to
put in another one or upgrade the current one?
That's a good question, and I don't know if we've reached that point yet. To be honest with you, I don't know if if chargers have been around enough to see a life cycle of a mega charger in particular, because they are fairly new technology. As we learn throughout this process, I think we're gonna learn a lot. And I think that's part of the data collection and the reporting is to see how these things work, right? But I honestly don't think that the industry is mature enough yet to understand the full life cycle of these. But it's something that is part of the grant and something that we're going to be keenly interested in seeing moving forward as well.
Thank you. Perfect. Dr. Sheriffs?
Thank you. And yes, thanks to staff for taking on a very complex project, which fits the complex challenges we're facing in terms of air quality and greenhouse gas emissions. As has been pointed out, this is comprehensive. It's not just infrastructure for personal vehicles, for commercial. It includes the generation of carbon neutral energy on site. And as several members have pointed out, I think it is important we continue to think about these as fueling stations. And that doesn't mean just one kind of energy, but potential because this is evolving technology and we don't know what the world will look like in 10, 15 years. So it's important that there's some flexibility built into this. This is also, as been pointed out, yes, the importance of supporting industry making this transition, the challenges industry faces, the trucking industry faces. There is a focus here on smaller businesses, supporting smaller businesses, not particularly in this grant, but in terms of who we're partnering with in this, which is good to see. Thinking about flexibility in the future, what's the plan for updating the board on the progress of this? Because it clearly going to take time to build out. And as Mr. McCauley pointed out, also concern about the life of this project. We want this to be a 20 or a 50-year project to be viable.
No, I think there's definitely opportunities for continued board involvement in this project. It is a large and substantial project here in the Valley. I would imagine we would be doing groundbreakings and we would be doing ribbon cuttings and, it's really celebrating the successes of the program as we move forward. Providing regular updates to the board is absolutely part of the plan. So that's definitely something that we, and we'll keep that in the forefront of our minds as we move forward.
Member Lewis. Vice Chair Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, this may be an odd question. I'm not sure if it is. So we're accepting this grant, but as a board, do we have any authority for placing any kind of conditions on this grant? And I think Dr. Sheriff touched on a few things here. I'm also interested in the longevity of this, and do we know what's in the contract as to how this is going to play out over the years? We understand, I guess, the company that's building it is responsible for it for the first 5 years, but after that, who takes over and who's responsible and what will happen?
Yeah, I'll give it a crack and Todd fill in on the blanks. Yeah, no, I think the board absolutely has some level of discretion over it. But I would just keep in mind, that this is a very specific proposal that was submitted. There's a budget. There's a lot of pieces to it deliverable. So I think the answer also is it just depends, right, on what specifically you may have in mind. Depending on what that request might be, it could either go against program guidelines, or it could add budget that's not accommodated in the budget, and then the project may not be viable. So I think conceptually, sure, I think there's different input that probably could be taken into account. For example, the suggestion that Supervisor Pereira made around, maybe having offices in Gustine and Taft. That's certainly something that could be, for example, part of the motion that request be made, and then we would definitely take that direction and work and see what we could do and try to accommodate that within the budget, within various project guidelines and other things have to take that into account. I think there's probably going to be some cost, I would imagine, some considerations with that, so that's something we would definitely engage with the project partner on and other ideas that may come up. So I think it just really depends on the specific suggestions that you may have.
And then the second part about, after the 5-year period is over, who takes over the maintenance and the care of these 2 sites?
It's theirs.
That's on Watt EV.
Okay.
Their involvement in the project does not end in 5 years. They take over ongoing maintenance and operation of the facility. It's going to be administered by them, and they'll continue to operate those facilities past the 5-year reporting period is just really for the CFI grant. And once that 5-year reporting period is over, that doesn't mean that there's any less responsibility for Watt EV to maintain these sites.
And whoever hits the button first to make a motion, I'd like to suggest that we add the condition to have these 2 sites have an office in Taft.
And just for clarification I'm sorry, you finish your, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but did you have anything to add to that? I was going to ask for clarification on that.
I'm sorry.
I'm asking for some clarification on that. I wanted to make sure you finish your thoughts.
Yes. The recommendation by Supervisor Pereira was to have office sites at Gustine and at Taft. I'm not going to get into tax purposes, but, for other things, it could be more than just that it would be good to have a local site where people can either talk to someone if there's an issue or a problem, or if the equipment goes down, there's someone they can get to right away to take care of that problem. So I'd like to, recommend that we add that as a condition of approval, that each site has their own office, if it's feasible and able to work it in the budget.
Okay, thank you for that last part. I think clarified the. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no more board comments, we're going to go out to public comment.
Are there any public comments in Bakersfield?
No public comment in Bakersfield.
Thank you. Are there any public comments in Modesto?
No public comments in Modesto.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public in Fresno that would like to comment? Seeing none in person, we do have some online comments. First, we have Janet Dietzkeme.
Morning, Janet.
Good morning. Good morning, Chair Chiesa, board members, and staff members. This is outstanding. This is the chicken and the egg. Only in this case, we can recognize what really needed to come first. I've been hoping for infrastructure, serious infrastructure discussions and happenings for 10 years now. A lot of people, the first thing they say is, I don't want an EV unless I can charge it easily as I can in putting gas in a combustion car. And one thing that I do know about people who I know who have EVs, their concerns are sometimes when they go to a charger, the charger doesn't work. And maintenance is very important as a part of this project. Also, I have found where people say there was a queue and they had to wait in order to use a charger. So those are 2 things that are in existence now, chargers that are not working and queues waiting to use the chargers. So this is exciting to have this project being arranged. I just can't say how happy I am, and I appreciate, and I'm so glad that this is happening finally now. As I say, the chicken and the egg in this issue is infrastructure is what generates the use of EVs. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, Janet.
We have another online comment, Cynthia Pinto Cabrera.
Morning, Cynthia.
Good morning, Chair and board members. Just wanted to quickly express congratulations to the Air District and Todd's team for getting this grant through. Very impressive that the Valley was able to be as competitive as it was in a national grant. So really excited to see all the work that you all are putting in towards this front. And again, just wanted to say quick congratulations, really excited about it. And, I know a lot of local colleges have been starting to up ramp their electric vehicle maintenance training program. So I think that's something that's up and coming here in the Valley. So thanks to the Valley Air District efforts for, boosting a new kind of workforce here in the Valley. So congratulations again, and looking forward to seeing where this project goes. Thank you.
Thanks, Cynthia.
No further comments online.
So this is, when you see these big grants, they're becoming more normal, and I don't want anyone to be complacent with these big numbers. Instead, we should be proud of the work that the Air District's doing. Todd, to get this type of a grant, it's outstanding. I know Member Robinson said it more eloquently than I can. When I look forward to these projects, and the first slide, 45% of the truck traffic travels through the Valley, and we're 11% of the population, I think, here in the Valley. It's the ultimate reminder as to the issues we have here that aren't necessarily of our own doing. It has to do with topography and why the majority of the money from programs needs to be spent in the 8 San Joaquin Valley counties. And that's a perfect illustration, but it showed, because this is the biggest project in California, and it shows that people are starting to recognize that, and which I think is great. And I would like to take a modicum of credit for that, but I can't, because everyone else is doing this great work, and we get to sit up here and applaud you, for lack of a better word. So again, thank you for your hard work. And this is part of the infrastructure bill, part of the administration, and if money is available, we need to find it to help with our air quality and with the health of our folks. So with that, I'm going to bring it back to the board. Dr.
Move approval
Okay, with the conditions.
with the conditions.
All right. And we have a second.
I guess it would be point of delivery.
Point of delivery, yeah. We'll see. And that was Shucklian, call the roll.
Okay. Also through the chair, Mr. Rickman has joined the meeting. Mr. Couch?
Yes.
Ms. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. McCauley?
Yes.
Mr. Mendez?
Yes.
Mr. Pereira?
Aye.
Mr. Preciado?
Yes.
Mr. Reyna?
Yes.
Mr. Rickman?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
Dr. Sheriff?
Yes.
Ms. Shucklian?
Aye.
Ms. Nguyen?
Yes.
Mr. Chiesa?
Aye.
Through the chair, motion passes.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 7, receive an update on attainment planning efforts to address federal standards. There's no action on this item, but we will be having public comment.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and your board. My name is Emily Nealand, and I'm the program manager of our air quality planning team here at the district, and I'm joined by John Klassen, Director of Air Quality Science and Planning. So here today, just to give you a brief update on some of our planning projects that we're currently working through. Thank you. So as many of you know, the Valley faces a number of challenges with respect to meeting air quality standards here in the Valley due to our unique combination of topography, meteorology, as well as the fact that we're a major goods movement corridor. We have high population growth, pollution transport from other areas, wildfires, drought, and other considerations. So due to this, there's a number of factors that cause us to have to go above and beyond when it comes to cleaning our air here in the Valley in comparison to other regions. Really quickly, just want to touch on what PM 2.5 is. So you can see it here depicted on the slide compared to the size of a human hair. So they are particles with a diameter of 2.5 microns and smaller. They are a mixture of solid particles and liquid droplets in the air, and they're emitted directly or formed indirectly through chemical reactions between gases. So you can see these are very, very tiny particles. Those blue dots are PM10, so 10 microns in diameter. So very, very tiny particles that can cause a number of health effects as listed here on the slide. So it can cause a number of health effects. It gets into the bloodstream. It can cause premature death, asthma, a number of respiratory symptoms, hospitalizations, as well as other health impacts. Your board has long prioritized different strategies and plans to clean the air here in the Valley. with stationary source ozone and PM forming NOx emissions reduced by over 90% through over 670 regulatory actions. We recently quantified that again, so a lot of actions that your board has taken. On the state level, CARB's adopted numerous mobile source control programs, and this combined effort represents the nation's toughest emissions control program. We also operate strong incentive programs with over $6.2 billion in public and private investment. So through all of these efforts, we've made a lot of improvements with respect to air quality. However, more reductions are needed to meet the latest air quality standards. Some of that progress is depicted here on the slide. So you can see in 2002 to 2003, we had over 39% of days exceeding the air quality standards for PM 2.5, where today we have over 93% of days meeting the standard. So a lot of improvements have been made with respect to air quality. So one of the things I'm here to update you on today is our plan for the 2012 PM 2.5 standard. So in 2018, your board adopted the 2018 PM 2.5 plan, which addressed serious non-attainment area requirements for this standard earlier than required. EPA proposed full approval of this plan in December of 2021. However, they subsequently reversed their decision in October of 2022 and proposed to disapprove the plan. So in response to this, CARB withdrew the plan with district concurrence in October of 2022. So now we've been working diligently with CARB to develop an updated plan, which builds on the strategies that were within the 2018 PM 2.5 plan and includes revisions as necessary, incorporating latest guidance, feedback from EPA, and it will meet all Clean Air Act requirements. Most recently, your board took the first action towards completing these requirements in October, approving initial elements, including the emissions inventory, precursor demonstration, best available control measure analysis, which demonstrates the stringency of our rules, and news source review certification. And you can see those checked off here on the screen. So this just outlines the remaining elements that we're currently tackling in combination with CARB. Wanted to highlight as well a number of regulatory actions that your board has taken over the last few years, many of which were commitments in our 2018 PM 2.5 plan, as well as our 2022 ozone plan. So a lot of work has been done by your board, and a lot of these regulations are already implemented or are starting to be implemented in the coming years. So we are currently conducting extensive analysis with CARB to identify additional emission reductions to bring us into attainment of the 2012 annual PM 2.5 standard by its attainment date of 2030. The district is evaluating measures in the attainment strategy, which include continued implementation of recent district regulatory actions, a number of which I just highlighted on the previous slide, residential wood burning, potentially extending the wood burning season, or incentive-based measures through our existing program, evaluation of emission reductions from fallowed land through our conservation management practices program, reductions from stationary sources as identified through our control measure evaluation. And on the state side, CARB is evaluating implementation of their CARB state SIP strategy, which is focused on mobile sources, focused funding to reduce emissions in the valley with a focus on Kern County, such as heavy-duty trucks, locomotives, off-road equipment, and zero emissions infrastructure, as well as accounting for recent emissions reductions from our ag tractor replacement incentive program. We're also working with CARB to continue evaluating the feasibility of reductions from commercial charbroiling, building electrification, as well as other categories. So public process for this plan development is ongoing. We've had a number of workshops already. We're continuing to work with CARB to develop the remaining Clean Air Act elements that are required. We do have a public workshop this evening at 4 p.m. to provide an update to the public and receive some feedback on potential suggestions. We plan to have another workshop, and we'll be continuing to provide updates to your board, the Citizens Advisory Committee, and the Environmental Justice Advisory Group on plan development. So evaluation's ongoing. We are continuing to identify potential emission reduction opportunities, and we plan to take the proposed plan to your board for consideration in the second quarter of 2024. One other thing I wanted to touch on is contingency measures for both PM 2.5 and ozone. First, for PM 2.5, just a quick timeline on some of the history that's happened in the past few years. In 2021, EPA disapproved our contingency measures for PM 2.5. The following year, in November of 2022, there was a consent decree that set a timeline for EPA actions on contingency measures. In March of 2023, EPA released draft contingency guidance as suggested and urged by the district, CARB, and other areas. In May of 2023, the district adopted the PM 2.5 contingency SIP revision, including amendments adopted by your board for Rule 4901, which is our residential wood burning rule. In August of 2023, EPA proposed to promulgate a FIP, a federal implementation plan, which was closely mirroring the package that your board adopted. And in September, your board adopted amendments to Rule 8051, open areas, to include a contingency provision. On the state side, in October, CARB adopted the California smog check contingency measure. And in December, EPA approved all of the submittals, and they also took action to defer sanctions that the Valley was facing. We are also working on a contingency package for the 2008 and 2015 8-hour ozone standards. For the 2008 standard, EPA had previously approved our package. Your board had adopted amendments to Rule 4601, architectural coatings, to include a contingency provision. And in response to litigation in October of 2021, EPA withdrew their approval and disapproved our measures, which triggered sanctions and FIP clocks. For the 2015 standard, your board in December of 2022 adopted our ozone plan for that standard to attain by 2037. And due to needed EPA guidance, we did not identify contingency measures at that time. We are still awaiting EPA action on that plan. And due to the draft guidance coming out last March, it creates a path forward for us to address this requirement. So with CARB's partnership, we are preparing a SIP revision. We do have existing measures, contingency measures within District Rule 4601 and the California smog check measure. We are evaluating potential other requirements, and we're continuing to work through this analysis. And then lastly, just wanted to touch on our attainment status as well as maintenance plans that we're currently working on. We've attained a number of standards for CO, NO2, SO2, lead, ozone, PM10, and PM 2.5. We're currently evaluating attainment of the 1997 annual PM 2.5 standard and the 1997 8-hour ozone standard in 2023. CARB and the district are continuing to work towards attainment of the other ozone and PM 2.5 standards. And lastly, we are developing a number of maintenance plans currently, a second maintenance plan for the PM10 standard and a maintenance plan for one of the PM 2.5 standards. So these will demonstrate ongoing maintenance of these standards in the coming years, and it will allow us to officially be redesignated to attainment. So now I'll pass it to John. I know that was very heavy, so I appreciate you staying along with me.
Okay, thanks, Emily. So on top of all that work that Emily just talked about, we wanted to give you an update here. There's now a new standard we have to be working on in the coming years. So we want to give you an overview of what's happened recently. So going back in time a little bit, about a year ago, January 2023, EPA proposed a new PM 2.5 standard. Just last week, EPA then finalized that standard where they've lowered the annual average PM 2.5 standard from 12 micrograms to 9 micrograms, which is a pretty significant change. Within the same rule that came out last week, they are not changing the 24-hour average standard for PM 2.5 or the PM10 standard, so those are staying the same. It's just the annual standard that has been changed down to 9 micrograms. As a part of this final rule, EPA is also updating the air quality index, or the AQI, for PM 2.5, which is very common. They do this when they update standards, and I'll give an overview of that in just a minute. And they're also updating a few of the air monitoring requirements. So because of this new standard coming out, there's now a timeline set for planning actions that we have to walk through in the coming years to meet all the requirements. And I'll give you an overview of that in just a minute. So real quick on the topic of the air quality index for PM 2.5, I wanted to give you a scope of what's changing here. Like I mentioned, this is very common. EPA changes these scales when a standard changes. And just a reminder, the air quality index is this colored approach where you can have good air quality, which is green, moderate is yellow, unhealthy for sensitive is orange, and so forth. These are set for ozone, for PM 2.5, all the different pollutants, and we use this to issue an air quality forecast. You'll see these colors: good, or green, yellow, orange throughout the year. So what's changing here, really, the big change is the break point between good and moderate. If you look at the table in the middle of this slide, at the center column, you'll see the previous category where the break point between good and moderate was set at the previous annual standard of 12 micrograms. If you look to the right to that column, you see that changing. Now it's set at 9 micrograms. So what's going to happen here is we're going to have fewer good AQI days for PM 2.5 and more moderate days for AQI for PM 2.5, not because the concentration is changing, it's because the scale we use to measure the AQI is changing. So if you look all the way to the right-hand side, this is an example of what could happen with our data, or what will happen based on the last 3 years of PM 2.5 data across all of the Valley's counties. You can see as you go from that left-hand stacked bar to the right-hand, fewer good days in green and more moderate yellow days that we would expect due to this change. So what's the timeline that we're working with for this new standard that just came out last week? So we'll walk through some of the steps here along the way that we're expecting. So on the left-hand side, this was right now, EPA issued their final rule in February 2024. 1 year from now, by February 2025, states can then submit what's called a designation request, and that's based on the current air monitoring data. States and local air districts can look at their data and see if they're above 9 micrograms or below, and then they can make a recommendation on whether they should be designated attainment or non-attainment based on this new standard. Once this all goes to EPA, EPA then has another year until February 2026 to make official designations for states and local areas on whether they're going to be attainment or non-attainment. For areas designated non-attainment, they then need to take the following steps on the right-hand side, go through the planning process, which will likely be non-attainment for this 9 microgram standard. In the fall of 2027 is when we anticipate we have to put together a moderate plan for this standard, which is the first step for us. And that has an attainment deadline of 2032 is what we're expecting. Within that plan, if we need to show that 2032 attainment deadline is not practical, within that plan, there'll be an analysis to show that we can't meet it by 2032, and then we should be reclassified to what's called serious non-attainment, which gives us until 2036, all the way on the right-hand side of this, to attain that standard. Within those 2 points, between 2032 and 2036, we'd anticipate that serious attainment plan to be due to EPA that will help set up that 2036 attainment deadline. So as a part of this analysis, EPA published a couple of maps that were very interesting to give people a scope of what this is looking like. So in this map here, this is based on current air monitoring data. The different counties within the United States that are a dark green color, those are the ones that are over 9 micrograms currently and will likely be classified non-attainment for this new annual standard. So one thing I wanted to point out here was what's different about this annual standard, with it being so much lower. This isn't just a California issue anymore. With past annual standards, you would just see California's counties lit up like that as non-attainment areas. Now, if you look at this map, you're seeing all these counties across the United States that will be non-attainment for the standard and have to go through a planning process for PM 2.5, likely for the very first time. A lot of states have never done this before. California is used to it, but a lot of these states have never walked through the planning process for PM 2.5, and now they're going to have to for the first time. So this will be very new for a number of states and local air districts across the country. And if you look at these states on the East Coast and the Midwest, their counties are much smaller than California counties, but most of these lit up counties are where their large urban areas are, the big cities of these states where they have readings over 9 micrograms and likely have to go through this planning process. EPA also published a map of what they expect the air quality to be like in 2032. So all the way out to 2032, that moderate deadline for PM 2.5. And they did this based on what's expected to happen with the emissions inventory going out to 2032. So you see a fewer number of counties lit up here where they expect a number of counties to be below 9 micrograms by 2032. But there are still a number of counties that are highlighted here that still need more emissions reductions beyond what's expected in 2032 to meet that deadline. And likely we'll have to find new strategies, new reductions to get them there, or may have to be reclassified to serious non-attainment to give them a little bit more time towards 2036 to meet that standard. So what are the implications for the San Joaquin Valley for this new standard? This is the big question in front of us. We did want to note here that the year 2023 was a great year for air quality, and I'll show the results of that on the next slide. It's helping us make a lot of great progress towards meeting these annual PM 2.5 standards, but it is going to be very challenging to meet this 9 microgram standard. EPA, as a part of their final rule, they published their own analysis of different ideas and emission reduction measures that could be taken into place in different areas of the nation. They had an analysis of the San Joaquin Valley of things that we could do, but even in their recommended measures, the amount of emissions reductions we needed was still very short of what needed to happen to get us to attainment by 2032. Within EPA's analysis, they did not look at mobile sources. They looked only at local measures that we could do something here locally within our air district. So ahead of this new attainment plan deadline that we have in front of us, of course, we'll be working closely with CARB on the state level, EPA on the national level to evaluate the extent of this challenge, pursue needed research over the coming years, and of course, continue to look for more emissions reduction opportunities to help us get there. We did want to note too that all of the different planning efforts that Emily went over, implementing all of those strategies are already getting us more emissions reductions as we go forward in time. And as we continue to work on those plans and the strategies, that will all help towards building a strategy for this new standard to help get us to this point once we get closer to those attainment deadlines. So wanted to walk through this with you as well to talk about our recent air quality data in relation to this new standard. What does this mean for us? So I know there's a lot of numbers on here, so I can walk through this in a couple minutes. So if you focus first on the table on the left-hand side, this is air quality data for PM 2.5 for just the year 2023 only. And on the left-hand side, you can see all the different air monitoring locations we have across the valley. Then we have 3 columns of data here. The data in those cells in the table here is the average for just the year 2023. And then we're comparing that against these 3 annual standards that we have in front of us. The column on the left is the 15 microgram standard. To the right is the 12 microgram, and then all the way to the right is this new annual standard of 9 micrograms. So if you focus on the left-hand column first, you can see that in the year 2023, all of our sites measured an average below that 15 microgram standard, which is excellent, great progress towards that standard. If you go to the right, you can still see there's a number of sites still above 12 micrograms. This is the standard that Emily mentioned, the new plan that we're working on right now to get these last few areas below 12 in the coming years. Then on the far right-hand side, you can see all those cells colored red. These are areas still above 9 micrograms that will have to see improvements to get us to that point. And this was a really good year of air quality. So even under very good conditions, great air quality, you can still see the challenge of all these areas that still need to have more improvement to get below 9, even under great conditions. On the right-hand side, this is the official metric we use to compare against the annual standards, not just 1 year of data, but we average it over 3 years instead of 1 year. So this is an average of 2021 through 2023 with wildfire impacts removed. So a best case scenario. The years 21 and 22 weren't quite as good as 23. So when you bring those into the average, you see some of these numbers come up a little bit more compared to the table on the left-hand side. So you can see that in this look at it with the official metric, we're right at the 15 microgram standard. We're continuing our evaluation of that. We can make a case for attainment. The 12 microgram, you see a number of sites still above the 12 microgram standard. Then all the way to the right, the 9 microgram, the official metric, almost all of our sites are over 9 across the valley at this point. So this gives you an extent of the challenge we have in front of us and all the work we'll have to do to bring all these parts of the valley to below 9 micrograms. And of course, last point here is the work to meet the current standards we have in front of us and this new standard. Getting emissions reduction from federal sources is absolutely critical. As the state continues to implement their state SIP strategy, the slice of the pie that's under the jurisdiction of the state will continue to get smaller and smaller, making the federal piece a bigger and bigger piece of the remaining emissions here in the valley. And so having their partnership, having them step to the table and put out their measures to reduce emissions from interstate heavy duty trucks, locomotives, other mobile sources is really going to be key for this new standard. And of course, we'll continue to advocate for state and federal action to attack mobile sources and any funding opportunities we can go after to help turn over this type of equipment to get those reductions from mobile sources. And that's it for our update. We'd be happy to answer any questions.
Member Robinson.
Thank you for the report, and I I appreciate the data. I have some concerns. I think we all, want to improve the air quality. We want healthier conditions for us. But a few concerns. I mean, this is a very difficult standard to attain. First, I would like them to provide us with a pathway of how to get here. It seems like they give these mandates. They don't tell you how to do it. You have to figure it out yourself. So it would be helpful if they would show us a pathway. Also, if they could, like the mobile sources on the I-5 corridor, the 99 corridor, if they would help in that regard as well, that would certainly help this. Another point would be subtracting out some of the air quality we have no control over. For example, the Bay Area, let's say, even if you want to extend that, let's say Asia. But the point is using the monitors to take out what we have no control over. And lastly, and I know this goes against some of the mandates of EPA, but at least taking some consideration of the cost of these measures because they're so substantial. So thank you.
Thanks very much. Member McCauley.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, share some of those concerns from Member Robinson, particularly the state has a goal to burn 400,000 acres this year. I mean, how does that affect your ability to meet these standards? You know, and on the notion of pulling, data out, I mean, can we look to, pull efforts towards mitigating wildfire? Can we pull that out, particularly around prescribed burning, as I mentioned? So if we know the state's going to go out there and burn 400,000 acres, and that is going to be a public health effect, why are we ignoring that? And I understand that's not staff ignoring that, so don't take me the wrong way. It just seems like the EPA, CARB, the state of California really aren't on the same page around, how we keep our mountain communities safe. So I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done around that. I don't see us meeting these standards without some sort of concession to as Member Robinson suggested, pull some of this data out. So, thank you.
Thank you, Member Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I echo Member Robertson's concern. The other question I have is that, all of our monitoring systems on the 99 corridor, and we just approved a $56 million, $56 million to build 2 new electric stations on the 5 side. 5 is a highway that goes all the way from Northern California to Southern California. And yeah,
the Canadian border to the
yeah,
Mexican.
it's long. So I'm still concerned why we don't have any monitoring stations on the 5 side. And if we put stations there, would this be an average? I'm pretty sure we're going to pick up pollution coming from the Bay Area, but it doesn't average out anything if there's less pollution on the 5 side versus the 99 side.
I can provide a little bit of clarification on that, Council Member. So first of all, I just want to be clear. We do operate an air monitoring network that is primarily CARB's responsibility. We partner with them, so they operate some sites. We operate some sites. That combination is what's known as a federally required air monitoring network. It's regulated heavily. There's a lot of requirements that go into it, very expensive sites, a lot of QA/QC calibration, and your staff here do a great job at maintaining that site or that network that actually exceeds all the federal requirements. So there's a minimum level of requiring that you have to do. Our network in combination with CARB is actually already exceeding those requirements. I just want to be very clear about that. And then to answer your second question, it's not averaging, it's every individual part of the valley, every location would be looked at on its own. So there wouldn't be, now, I'm sure we've had these conversations from time to time here. We've added sites over time. It's grown, like I said, to where it's exceeding the federal requirements, but there is a substantial cost to that. In terms of federal requirements go, there is no gap, in terms of something that, would need to be addressed to meet the standards, but that is an ongoing conversation just due to questions like these. And obviously, the balance there with what's actually feasible in terms of, it's not only the site, but then there's staffing and other considerations that go into maintaining a site like that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Member Pereira.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question that, I hope it's not philosophical. If we were to eliminate 100% of the stationary sources of pollution, is there any way we would be able to reach attainment on the new standards? I know the new standards just came out and maybe you don't have time to, or haven't evaluated it to have an answer, but I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I could answer that question. So we looked at this in the past, not only for stationary sources, but for different, as we think about what are the emission sources in the valley, how much does everything contribute, and develop our plans and our various measures. And why you keep hearing so much about the importance of working with CARB and the federal government on mobile sources is that it's very clear that there really is an inability for one sector, in this case stationary sources, to meet the standard by itself. You're correct. Actually, with this new standard, if you were to eliminate all those already very heavily regulated sources, there would be, based on my estimation at this point, you're right, we haven't analyzed the data. There's a lot of considerations that go into this. It's 1 week into this new standard, so we'll have to take a lot of time to really evaluate this. But it is going to take significant, substantial reduction across all sectors to be able to meet a standard this low, that is actually encroaching on levels that are consistently being updated as new science comes out to what we call background levels. There's impacts, as was mentioned earlier, from other regions as well. So that is, you're getting sort of to the heart of the question in terms of what is the possibility with meeting the standard. Even EPA in their own analysis in publishing the standard, John had talked a little bit about this in his presentation. They actually looked at some scenarios where there was a significant reductions in residential wood burning and restaurants, charbroiling, industrial facilities. Again, did not look at mobile sources in those scenarios. And even with all of those projections, we're only able to identify between 15 to 30% of the need. And so, and we haven't obviously been involved in we're just reviewing what was published out there by EPA, but there's still a massive reduction, even with those scenarios put into place, that are going to need to happen, that only highlight what I think is your main point, which is that it's going to be very, very challenging to meet the standard.
Okay, and then and I appreciate that, and I realize it's new data, or not new data, but kind of a short time for analysis. But the other point I think would, I don't know if it's possible or not, but that is to get the emissions that come out of natural causes, right? I mean, in our case, most notably forest fires, pulled out of the requirements, so that we're not held accountable for those emissions. I know the people, if you live in the valley or you live anywhere in California, there's a major forest fire, you still have to breathe the air. But I just think that would help us immensely in meeting our goals. And I don't know if that's possible, but I fantasize about that, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Member Mendez.
The first question is an easy question. Where did they come up with these numbers?
Mr. Chair, I'll try to respond to that. So just to back up a little bit, yeah, so under the Clean Air Act, EPA is required to periodically review the standards. And the short answer to that is that as part of that review process, they have to look at a number of health studies and then derive some sort of recommendation from reviewing the latest health studies. As John mentioned, the proposal was made by EPA about almost exactly a year ago. They proposed a range. At that time, it was an 8 to 11 microgram range that was proposed by EPA. That went through a public process over the last year, and ultimately they landed at 9 micrograms. But it's driven by the literature review and the work that's done, and there's a body within
hopefully it's
committee within EPA.
Reviewed.
There is a whole process that I think that's one of the fundamental principles of that review. But to be clear, when they set the standard under the Clean Air Act, it's very specific that it's based on the health science and health effects, and it's not required, or it's not actually allowed, that process to take into account implementation costs and and feasibility. No,
Right,
there is some
but
supporting
there's
information.
still in the act, it's kind of a variable. I mean, it's not like I'll throw an example, the Clean Water Act that was done in the early 2000s. That actually has specific numbers in the actual act itself. Where this is, you're allowing a government body to do it it's like left open for them to do it as they move forward.
Yeah, I think there is a process under the act.
Right. But
and you do have to end up with a specific standard, right? Under
the Clean Air Act, we're looking at an older act that leaves stuff wide open for them to come in and review it. Now, you could have a new administration. This is what I'm going to talk theoretically deal. You could have a new administration come in. And EPA might decide, hey, we're going to review this. And they come up with a little bit different standard. Either way, that's all in the there's too much leeway on exactly how they do that, is what I'm saying. It gives them, just a discretionary way, and then they use all this mumbo jumbo to come up with, well, this is where we come up with this stuff. Well, it's basically, if you can't wow them with brilliance, you baffle them with BS. And then they come up with, well, we got all these peer reviews that say this is, where the standard should be. But you have some that say it's 12 and you have some that says it's 8 or 7. So they're just trying to find a window instead of saying, what I'm saying is, I think we have to contend with this. We're looking at how do we do it instead of saying, where is the root cause of this madness?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I could just quick, it absolutely is a difficult task to ultimately land on what that health science driven standard should be. I do have to note, there are significant, and we talk about this very, very often here at the board meetings, increasing bodies of research around the health effects associated with PM 2.5. A lot of new research done. How you actually look at that research and where you ultimately land is clearly a very difficult task by EPA. But the main point I'm trying to make on that side of it is that under the Act, ultimately it's the health science that drives the standard. And then from an implementation point of view, then the question becomes how do you go about it? How do you implement it? Yeah.
And then you threw another one. I'll call it background. What's the background? This isn't easy like radiation. It's really easy to figure out what your background radiation is. Because everywhere it's a little bit different, but it's kind of a constant where you have to do a lot of analysis to really say, well, what is the background? If nobody actually lived here, what it would be. Because I don't think we'd be guessing at that, correct? To say what the background?
Probably use a slightly different term. There is ongoing work to try to understand through modeling projections. I mean, clearly, we do reside here, and there are anthropogenic emissions here in the valley and other parts of the country. But there are tools that we all are looking at, and I think are going to be very important moving forward. I think having this good understanding.
It's a heck of a lot more complicated than checking the background rate.
Yes, I think it is important to understand, exactly where different sources of PM 2.5 come from. Some of that is going to be what's called biogenic, meaning, from surrounding and natural, wildlands and other activities, right? And a lot of it will also be anthropogenic. That understanding is something that we, through every life cycle of a plan, and your board is very supportive of doing groundbreaking research here in the Valley. It's going to require that ongoing work to really get a good handle on all these different facets.
Right, because that's our ultimate problem was we have a certain amount of background, and the deal is to model it. Well, where does it come from? How does it get here? Is it wildlife, type deal? Does it blow in here? There's a lot of it's a lot more complicated. Anyway, thanks for answering my question.
Member Rickman.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. And this is for Samir. When we're creating regulations and policies to meet these standards, the question I always have is, what do we do about, intra versus interstate and even out of country emissions that are coming in via, big rigs, for example? I mean, you look at least part of the valley, at least where I'm at, we have the expansion of industrial. So that's more big rigs coming down. Somebody mentioned I-5, right? And, it just seems that no matter what we do, we can create and craft all these regulations, but it only impacts, our folks, and they have the burden with these regulations and these impacts that they may have. But the out of state or out of country, they don't. So how do we deal with that? I mean, would there be some type of exemption? I mean, how much traffic coming from, out of country and out of state? I mean, and then how does that affect interstate commerce and that aspect of it?
Thank you, Supervisor. That's a great question. And there are different, through the chair, just a quick response to that. There are different sort of out of valley impacts that are going to be very important for the board and us working with CARB and EPA to really get a good handle on as we think about the new standard and what it's going to take to really meet the standard. You mentioned a few of them. You have the impacts from other regions. You can also have international impacts and there is increasing science on the West Coast, for example, being impacted, heavily. A lot of the work's been done on ozone for summer impacts, but there's increasing work now as well on PM 2.5, which is relevant to the discussion we're having here with the new standard. There's also was mentioned by Supervisor McCauley on the wildfire and prescribed burn issues. Those are also what I would consider impacts from activities that are going on that are not within the control of local sources of regulatory or other activities. All of these different pieces are going to have to be really well understood. And I think one of the things that John, again, going back to his presentation, had mentioned is there is going to need to be even more research, even more work done kind of across the board, everything from understanding what we call the emissions inventory of different sources, what we call source apportionment, how much of different emission sources actually contribute to our PM 2.5, and then policy tools to deal with those different things, right? So there are, how we deal with each of them is different. So like on the wildfires and prescribed burning, there is recognition, by the way, when the standard was published, that this is a big deal, the wildfire issue and prescribed burning. Now, we're not sure whether the tools are in place today. So we're actually taking a look at that right now. There's actually some tools that were published by EPA recently. Our staff are reviewing those. When it comes to international transport, the Clean Air Act has some provisions actually within it that allow for some level of accounting as it relates to a region's ability to meet a standard. But you do have to have some pretty extensive research and have a good understanding of what those impacts are, the scale of the impact, so that you can ultimately take that into account and think about all of these things together. So I think the short version of what I just said is that it is going to be very important that we all work diligently in the region, again, with our partners at CARB, even NASA, who's doing a lot of work now with, there's remote monitoring going on. I think there's more and more data coming out about where emissions are coming from and the scale of those emissions. I think all of that's going to play a huge role in ultimately our ability to succeed in meeting the standard, right? I think the goal here is ultimately to make sure we all have an understanding of what's happening and what the scale of the challenge is and what it's going to really take, and to make sure we get those public health benefits that are ultimately tied to the standard that was promulgated by EPA. So that's going to be, you're going to hear a lot about that over the coming years as we are going to be doing a lot more research on this and hopefully taking advantage of other work that's being done to answer the questions that you're asking, Supervisor.
All right, thank you, Samir. I just hope, that they do listen. I mean, there's like I think, Member Robertson, mentioned it, very well, is, hey, there's stuff that's out of our control and, it has to be fair. So thank you, sir. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Good comments. Dr. Sheriffs.
I have some comments that I hope will be helpful, but I'll start with a question. Was this AI generated, these pictures? Could we have a little disclosure here? Looks suspicious. Yeah, I think this is a great discussion, because this is obviously a very complicated and huge challenge, and these are all things we need to consider and be sure are out there. I called a physician friend who served on one of these advisory panels, because I wanted to remind myself of the process, because where did this bar come from? And he reminded me, yeah, these scientific advisory review panels, EPA is required every 5 years. They review the literature of the previous 5 years. So it's the new literature that's out there. And this is an incredible review, because it involves literature that comes from 26 countries, 600 cities, and is analyzing millions of deaths. So there's peer review at a lot of levels. And I will remind people, part of peer review is we're looking for ways to poke holes in what other people have done. We're looking for mistakes they made in their design or their statistics. So this is really the most comprehensive review of the 2.5 literature ever. If you want the details, the integrative scientific assessment is online, and there is fortunately an executive summary, but that's certainly available to all of us. It's frustrating for all of us, because we work so hard to achieve what we achieve, and then we're told, sorry, the goalpost has moved. Well, that's the nature of science. The goalpost could have moved the other way. The data could have proved that, in fact, this wasn't as dangerous as we thought it was. But in fact, the developing literature tells us PM 2.5 is even more dangerous than we thought it was. And I just want to add, in terms of health effects, we didn't talk about brain health in here. We didn't talk about emerging literature on dementia. These small particles are so dangerous because they're inflammatory, and everybody should fear inflammation. And they are so small, they get into the deepest recesses of the lung and cross into the bloodstream. So that's why primary pulmonary effects, because they're in the lung, that's the primary interface. But you get these cardiovascular effects, strokes, heart attacks, and that's where most of the deaths come from, cardiovascular, because it gets into the bloodstream and is inflammatory. So yes, the rules for the review say you can't consider cost, but cost is built in when the decision is, where's the standard going to be? Because you get people on the scientific panel, and individuals make recommendations, and there's a consensus from the panel, and then the EPA will decide. Well, that standard, the 9 microgram standard, is 4,500 deaths per year. And yes, there's a cost to that. And if we want to lower the standard even further, well, then fewer deaths. And if we want to raise the standard, well, let's do 11 micrograms, because that's an easier hurdle. Well, I don't know the numbers, but it's not 4,500 deaths, it's 6,000 deaths or 8,000 deaths. And we all understand it's very difficult to put a price on a life. But sometimes I find it helpful, and this isn't an answer, but comparing to other things that we spend money on. Well, my factoid in my brain is always 45,000 automobile deaths per year. And those numbers change. But we clearly spend a lot of money on highway safety and auto safety. We think those deaths are important. And we clearly could spend more and lower those numbers. But so the policy decision is, well, where are we going to set the bar? Is it going to be 4,500 deaths, 6,000 deaths, 9,000 deaths? So that's where the cost does begin to enter into it. And then it's, yes, we get to implement it. And I share, gee, it'd be nice if they told us how to do it, but if they told us how to do it, we'd be really angry. Because one size doesn't fit all, and the way we can do it is different than the way somebody else can do it. So there we are. So that's a little philosophy, I guess. I would also observe, and I guess this is philosophy too, we don't have the authority to regulate transportation. But I also remind myself, in many ways, we own it, because we can push the federal policy that changes the standards in terms of pollution, emissions, mileage, greenhouse gas emissions. And we certainly own it every time we hop in our cars and go somewhere, when we buy things that were delivered by trucks. So we may not regulate it, but we do own it in many important ways. And, our first item is one example of a way we try and address that. We work hard finding partners and incentive funds to move things in the right direction. That one project isn't going to solve our problem, but it's going to set an example, and it's going to improve the technology and future costs. So, and I guess I end on that optimistic note. I am so impressed with what we accomplish when we get collaborative. Look to those other states that are now going, oh yeah, this is a problem. Well, good. Those are allies, collaborators to get changes at the federal level in terms of lowering those emissions, because that's really what we want. Because we want fewer deaths, we want fewer asthma attacks, we want fewer hospitalizations. So the numbers look daunting, and I certainly not being a Pollyanna, but we have a lot of policies in place that are working now to help get where we need to go. Are we going to get to the number with just those things? No, but it gets us a long way there, and we have to continue to be creative and collaborative. And what a great staff we have, thank goodness, supported by this board. So thank you.
Member Rickman, did you push your button again?
Yeah, it's real quick, Chair. Just to respond to Dr. Sheriff and what he was saying, but hey, there is repercussions in the discussion or the decisions we make, cause and effect. I mean, let's talk about electric vehicles, and there's just a study out about, I've discussed, the weight of these vehicles, now you're adding tonnage or even 2,000 pounds to just regular passenger cars. And there's talks about our guardrail system, our emergency, guardrail system on our freeways not being adequate to stop these vehicles. So how many deaths will that cause? So there's a cause and effect to everything that we do. So just wanted to put that out there.
Member Robinson?
Just more theory. Unfortunately, and I wish it weren't the case, but costs are one element to everything that we do. And I know that we don't control what's going on down in Arizona, but people slip in the Grand Canyon every year. So should we put a fence around the Grand Canyon? So we have to mitigate all of these things, because at some point the costs get so high that it affects the standard of living for all of us.
So I know I can wrap up the board comments before we go out to the public, because it's there's general concern here that the cost. I look at something and I take this global view, and that when back in 1980, whenever I look at this chart over here, which is this one for the listening public, that just shows the progress, I think what would have been like to be a board member when the technology wasn't available, when the money wasn't available, there weren't programs to help mitigate down to the 93% reduction in the stationary sources. When you think from that perspective, I know today, and I think it's been clear based on our questioning, that with $6.3 billion of investment, private and public monies to do this, this may take $60 billion, it may take $200 billion to meet this new standard. And it's impossible with what we're in control of. That's why the partnership, we keep talking about partnerships with the state and the federal government, because it's going to come through mobile sources. In the end, that's going to be the place, and that's not in our control. But we see that as long as there's money coming, we can make incremental gains. And speaking to Dr. Sheriffs, they're absolutely right. I'm glad I heard that explanation, but everyone knows that lower is better, and there's the cost benefit analysis in everything we do. When you get into a car, you accept some risk that 45,000 people a year die in that car, and we try and mitigate the risk, or the car dealer, car manufacturers do. So, in living and in a society, we can't have an absolute no carbon footprint, and there's going to be emittance, and we have to continually try and deal with it. So I agree with all the comments I heard today, but it shouldn't stop us from, again, trying to make these incremental steps so that in 2045, and I think Dr. Sheriff and Member Mendez are the two longest serving board members on this board, and the success they've seen in a decade plus, and what it's going to be like in 2040 or 2050 when I'm not on the board. Someone's saying, geez, I wonder what they were thinking back in 2024. So again, I don't want anyone to get too high, too low. It's a challenge. It's daunting. I never say impossible. The wildfire issue is always going to play into this conversation, things that we can't control, and absolutely should be excluded from our purview of making the standard. But we just need to go from 12, to get down to 11.9 and 11.8 and just work our way down. And how do you eat an elephant, everyone? One bite at a time. And so we need to continue. That's really good.
Thank you, teacher.
Hey, you know what I say about my mother-in-law? No, I love her. Is she watching? I love you. I'm just kidding. Out to the public.
Thank you. Any public comments in Bakersfield?
No public comment in Bakersfield.
Thank you. Any public comments in Modesto?
No public comment in Modesto.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public in Fresno that would like to comment? Seeing none in person, we do have some online. First up is Cynthia Pinto Cabrera.
Welcome back, Cynthia.
Hello, thank you. I think last time I failed to mention Cynthia Pinto with the Central Valley Air Quality Coalition. I think I was just too excited about the Tricks project to mention that. But wanted to say that Valley has a long history of coming up with these plans. We kind of have a system in place. So as we look towards this new standard, I would encourage the district to let's start planning now. We know we're going to be out of attainment because we're just barely starting to meet standards from 1997. So I would encourage us to be as intentional as possible. And some of you mentioned a lot of collaboration. So really looking forward to that. We don't have to wait for determination of us being out of attainment. Let's start now. And I think 2015, 2016 timeframe, when there was really robust planning process where board members came to the community, staff was coming into the community. Let's recreate that. Let's do that again. The standard is going to be really tough to meet. So really hope we can be as collaborative as possible. Also wanted to mention that wanting to start now is going to be really important because we also do have a long history of turning plans in late, which will run us into those sanction problems that y'all are so concerned about, will run us into potential federal implementation plans that you all have expressed concerns about in the past. The 2012 plan was legally due at the end of December 2023, and now we're looking at maybe June 2024 for that to be turned in. So we're turning that in 6 months late. So I'll encourage us to be as proactive as possible. And, we want to gather community members to give you all their ideas and, invite stakeholders from throughout and host, very robust public processes. So really, really looking forward to that. There's going to be a tough standard to meet, but I think there's a really good opportunity for us to be as collaborative as possible. And hopefully, the weather stays the same where we're seeing more years like 2023, but I don't think it was mentioned earlier. We do have a wildfires or exceptional events clause under the Clean Air Act where those wildfires are removed. So just to address some of those board member concerns is that they are being removed. And right now as they're looking towards the determination of the 1997 annual standard that was cut off at the end of December last year, they're analyzing right now as we speak all those exceptional events. So really hopeful that we're meeting that annual standard. Hopefully here in the next couple months, they'll let us know that we did it. So really hopeful and really looking forward to more collaboration with you all. But yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Cynthia.
Okay, next we have Janet Dietzkeme.
Welcome back, Janet.
Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Sher.
Janet, we just lost you. If you can hear me. Okay, so now go ahead and start. Let's start the clock over for it because we had. Okay, go ahead, Janet. You got to start from the beginning.
Thank you. Dr. Sheriffs, thank you for your comments. The new standards are very important to all San Joaquin Valley residents. Everyone benefits from cleaner air. We live in a bowl. Many residents are injured by breathing San Joaquin Valley unhealthy air. This winter of inversion conditions has been difficult for me and for others with respiratory diseases. And I'd like to add that medical costs are never included in cost evaluations. It is expensive to have asthma. It's expensive to end up in the emergency room and in the hospital. Some of us, those are our conditions. We've had many days during this inversion time with unhealthy air. I've had many text messages from the district warning me from going outside. There were a few days with clean air following rain. Last night was rain, and the air is good for me to go out. Yesterday, that was not the case. Poor air quickly replaces the clean air the day after rains. Now, I have said for years, a real quick way to improve the air, especially during inversion months, is ban residential burning. No one needs to be using their fireplace except some few where that is their only source of warmth. The rest of us have other ways to heat our homes. The stationary sources are easier for us to address over the mobile sources. And residential burning is a stationary thing. There are so many of us in this valley who are looking forward to being able to have clean air so we can go out and enjoy being outside. Everybody in this valley benefits by cleaner air. These new standards are welcome by me. And don't forget, there are those medical costs that are never considered. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet.
Thank you. Next, we have Thomas Menz.
Hey, welcome, Thomas. Are you there, Thomas?
Yes, sorry, there was a little delay for the unmute button showing up on my screen here. So I'm Thomas Menz. I'm a resident, long suffering of Fresno County. I see nothing wrong with having the Clean Air Act mandate that scientists do science. I think that EPA should have gone further. I think we should have met World Health Organization guidelines with a 5 microgram standard per year, because there are very few days when I can walk outside as my doctor advises me to do every day. He said, don't do it when the air is bad. So I tend to follow his risk guidance. a number of you have mentioned, wildfires and these exogenous emissions coming from China and the Bay Area. The truth is that compare the wildfire emissions, for instance, in the emissions inventory that you've prepared to residential wood burning. And it's something like residential wood burning, which you can control, is 17 times greater in terms of tonnage, tons per day, than wildfire emits. So look at your emissions inventory. Take Dr. Sheriff's advice and look at the executive summary of what EPA has done. I mean, you have that available to you. You're curious about it. You raise these objections to it. Actually look into it. It's available. It's there. The internet is your friend. You can find this stuff. And thank you, Chair Chiesa. We have to do what we can. If eliminating residential wood burning, if eliminating charbroiling, if that only gets us 30% of the way, let's start down that path, one step at a time. Let's put that in our in the 2012 plan that you're developing right now. Let's start on it. Why wait? Why delay? I mean, it's my neighbor builds bonfires, and they've got a couple of marshmallows on coat hangers, and that means they're allowed to do this. I mean, other districts are restricting cooking when the air is bad, cooking with solid fuel. So let's stop burning solid fuel, at least in the valley. That's something you do have control over. Thank goodness, that we're able to find the alternatives to burning for agriculture, but we just need to do what we can, eliminate the residential wood burning, I would emphasize. And thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Thomas.
There's no further online comments.
Any final comments from the board? This is just, we're just receiving an update. Okay. Thank you all. Moving on to item 8, consider and approve proposal to address organizational and resource opportunities. And thank you, Emily and John.
Hello, Mr. Chair, board members. I will actually present this item myself, get that presentation up. Actually, just building off that last discussion, talking about a recommendation that I think will be very helpful to your board and to the agency as we move forward in dealing with a lot of our challenges here. So we do, as you all know, and welcoming Councilmember Nguyen to her first meeting here, have a core value of continuous improvement. We're very much into, as you've, I think, seen today with that truck project and other very innovative work that we do here. We do always look for continuous improvement in what we do. We routinely take a look at our operations. There's another item on the agenda related to the budget subcommittee that I think is another opportunity for really understanding and seeing this in action in terms of our identity as an agency in always looking for ways to try to be more efficient or more effective in what we do. We have been taking a look recently at our organizational structure and really looking at it, with an eye towards the future and various challenges that we have facing us here in the Valley and in our role as a public health agency. Succession planning is a very important component as well of how we structure ourselves, and we're constantly looking for ways to make sure that we have a strong workforce, that we have good training programs and planning in place. And so we do have some opportunities that we've identified that I'll share a little bit with you here and have some recommendations for your board to consider that address short and long-term succession planning needs, as well as some benefits in terms of operational effectiveness and efficiency. And I think just this last discussion was an example of an area where there's certainly some challenges facing us that I think these recommendations fit very, very neatly into. So we've got the various mandates that we have to meet. We have to work very closely with government at all levels, local government, state and federal, to accomplish our mission. It's clear that the challenges are very significant. Not all of the emissions that we have to deal with here at the board are directly under the control of the district. So as you've seen, we have to work very closely, very creatively to try to reduce emissions across the board and support these efforts. Mobile sources, you heard a lot about that. And the main authority for that, again, as you've heard, is really with the federal and the state government. And so funding, as you saw again earlier, is a critical component of accelerating these reductions. There's a regulatory framework, and clearly we operate, very much within that. But we also have to figure out ways for the Valley to be first, as the nation, the state transitions, that we look at new technology. We want to be the ones here in the Valley, given our air quality challenge, to benefit the earliest and the most from these transitions. And that's only become more complex, more intense. There's new funding streams. You heard about one of them this morning that we had to compete very heavily with. But we're very active in this space just because of the need and, again, the identity of who we are, trying to be very innovative in the work that we do. I'm not going to go through all of these here, but just examples of some of the federal activities that are very important to us being able to deliver to the public the results that we're all looking for in terms of public health, working with EPA, trying to streamline implementation, trying to come up with good policy, for the Clean Air Act, advocating for grants and resources, looking at the wildfire issues, the forest management, prescribed burning. There's a lot going on in that space. We've heard just one example, the 400,000 acres. There's actually, it's 1 million acres is an annual goal, really, between federal and state combined. And so there's going to be a lot of work going on in that area that we have to be very active in, and make sure that we have good support going to that. You've got the vehicle standards, and then, of course, getting approval and working with EPA for them to support our planning efforts and making sure that we avoid the very strict penalties that actually face us. And often we're having to work very, very heavily with EPA to try to make sure we avoid these sanctions under the Clean Air Act. And this last year, we worked through some major issues kind of along those lines. There's also state activities. There's a lot of advocacy that needs to happen this year and beyond. We all know it's going to be a very tough budget situation. There's very important programs that the Valley has actually developed that we've created models for, that other parts of the state are benefiting from, that we've been able to get into the state budget process, like the farmer program, which for the benefit of some of the newer board members, that's actually an acronym. Just it's all in caps because every letter in that acronym means something. I think F is funding, and so on. And I won't, go through the whole acronym here, but that's why just a little bit of more information for you there. But there's very important programs that are in the state budget that we have to support very, very strongly and creatively to make sure we're able to continue moving forward with those programs. And there's also just a lot of air quality policy that happens in the state and the federal government as well. There's bills that we have to engage with stakeholders on and meet with our legislators here in the Valley constantly every year, just trying to make sure that our priorities and that our needs are effectively communicated and advocated for in these different processes. And then locally, this board is and the staff here are very, very active in supporting and working with local governments. There's a lot of mandates that are facing our cities and counties. There's a lot of shared goals in working with our local government here in terms of moving forward and trying to build out infrastructure. And we heard some of that this morning, again, as an example of that, working through programs like our indirect source review program, which is one of the innovative strategies this board's put into place. As an example, CEQA is a big deal, and making sure that we're working together and looking at these impacts. And we have a very active presence in looking at projects and ensuring air quality is adequately looked at, and that there's actually solutions that are reviewed in that process, so that we can all here do a better job in understanding and mitigating impacts. And then the grants activities, there's a lot that goes on in this program. Again, you've heard examples of that already this morning. A lot of funding is coming through this program. It's over $500 million projected in the upcoming fiscal year. It's not easy to spend this money. You saw one example of that, I think, today. A lot of details. There's deadlines. There's program requirements. There's follow-up reporting. all various aspects of program administration. And then, of course, something we take a lot of pride in is delivering all those programs with exceptional customer service. Anybody who needs help can give us a call. They get a hold of an actual person who can walk them through the process. We have online portals, we have paper applications, whatever it takes to basically make sure that our residents can access these funds in our business communities and agencies and others that are partners with us. And so we did identify, and going back and looking at the organizational structure again, we did identify a need in this program to provide lead level support to make sure that, given that complexity and obviously with that standard of service in mind, that we maintain that program effectiveness moving forward. And so with all that stated, we have identified some recommended enhancements with the review that we conducted that I think is going to be a very good move, a strong recommendation from us to help us with our challenges. One of them is to consolidate our federal, state, and local government functions here at the Air District into a new and single kind of department that we're calling the Department of Policy and Government Affairs. It's going to be, a big opportunity, I think, for us to improve our effectiveness in the space, to do a lot of cross-training and succession planning by having, those functions, be under a new director position. That's the staffing changes recommended there. It would actually be a reclassification of an existing position into a director position. So this actually wouldn't result in any new staffing. It would be basically a shift of staffing along with a reclassification. And then on the grants piece of it, we would want to add some supervisory capacity to the grants program by reclassifying an existing vacant position into a grant supervisor. And that would help, again, deal with the scale of the funding that we have, the service that we need, and ensure that we have a proper supervisory ratio in that program to help get all that funding out the door with all the high expectations that your board has put into place and that we continue to strive towards with our programs. So with that recommendation sort of in totality, what we're actually seeing there would be actually a net savings overall to the district with those two reclassifications, a net savings of about $2,200 for the remainder of this fiscal year. And then you can see there the actual changes that are being recommended. The two reclassifications are covered in that table, and what the monthly savings at the bottom there total over the course of moving forward. And there are no amendments to the budget required at this time with these recommendations, but the recommendations are what I just stated. Basically, I won't read the whole recommendations here, but it would be the reclassifications, of those two positions, and which will allow us to also do the consolidation that was mentioned and help us move forward and address, what are going to be some very, very complex challenges, and will only position us to better respond to those and take advantage of all the opportunities that could be in front of us, with this new structure in mind. So with that, Mr. Chair, and board members, I'll turn it back to you for any questions, and happy to
go ahead.
address any concerns.
Thank you very much. And so it's great that it comes out and it saves some money, and I know that everyone will be proud, but the way this organization was growing, that wasn't necessarily the key component for me personally, just because the need is there. When we talked about the $6 billion, about what $4 billion of that is through grants and other opportunities, and we have to spend so much more time advocating in the future just based on the previous conversation. And so the way you've restructured this, I love it, by the way. And Tom Jordan's been our main advocate, or the advocacy person. I've been in his way just enough at meetings, along with you, Samir, to see that he's a 30-some-year employee of this organization since its inception. And because he's probably in his 40s, but he rides a bicycle like he's in his 60s, it's brought it to the forefront. And I mean that, but that was a conversation that we've had. Succession planning is so important to any organization. That's one of our main functions, to make sure that, there's someone behind you, no matter what your position is, to fill it and be able to be capable, or we're not doing our job, or Samir, you're not doing your job, and we are doing our job. And this is just another step in the right direction, because we have so much institutional knowledge, and Tom, and potentially, when people retire, you take 32 years of knowledge, and grant programs, which are so complex, So I love this reorg. I would tell you it should have been done last year, but I'm glad that we're doing this, and this is organization-wide. I see myself and the organizations that I'm in besides this one, I see sometimes we're failing. And when I meet with department heads, that's my whole conversation is how are we transferring knowledge, how are we cross-training? And I want to know that's being done. This organization does it better than anyone I've ever been involved in. And this is, again, another step in the right direction. So those are my thoughts, Supervisor Mendez.
Thank you for saying that, because all I needed now say is ditto. That was very good, Vito. No, but I think the only thing is we probably should have done this sooner. But, I think you found a way to do it now, because we've talked about it over the years that we need to do something. And I like the way you did it. And Tom's doing a great job. We've got a lot of institutional knowledge that, we need to transfer to other people. And that's the bottom line.
Dr. Sheriff.
Ditto. Question, and yeah, I mean, on Buddy's comment, seems to be a great idea. Maybe should have done it before. Anytime there's a change, there's a benefit and a cost. Is there a cost to consolidating in this instance? Every organization is different, but I wonder if there's any potential loss and how to not have that happen.
Do you mean like a fiscal cost, or do you? Sorry, just to clarify.
In terms of, why are we doing this? Because we want to keep being nimble and creative and responsive and be better advocates and the accountability through the grants program. And it seems to enhance all of those things. Is there a potential loss?
No, I feel like it's a win-win situation, and the expectations will be high and continue to be even higher, as we move forward. And so but that to me is what makes this organization great, is that we keep striving for, for even more innovation and advocacy. So that's not a cost. I think that's a win. So yeah, appreciate the question.
Yep. I see no other board comments going out to the public.
Are there any public comments in Bakersfield?
No public comment in Bakersfield.
Thank you. Do we have any public comments in Modesto?
No public comment in Modesto.
Thank you. Do we have any members of the public in Fresno that would like to comment? Seeing none, we do have one online comment. Janet Dietzkeme.
Yes, I'd like to say how I appreciate the work that the district and board put together. A good example was our first discussion this morning about the EV infrastructure, et cetera. I do appreciate it. It sometimes doesn't seem fast enough for those of us who are suffering from breathing the air, but I do have appreciation for the hard work. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
No further online comments.
Back to the board.
Motion to approve.
Second.
The motion, I'm going to go with Preciado. Second.
Okay, Mr. Couch.
Yes.
Ms. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. McCauley?
Yes.
Mr. Mendez?
Yes.
Mr. Pereira?
Aye.
Mr. Preciado?
Yes.
Mr. Reyna?
Yes.
Mr. Rickman?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
Dr. Sheriff?
Yes.
Ms. Shuglian?
Aye.
Ms. Nguyen?
Yes.
Mr. Chiesa?
Aye.
Through the chair, motion passes.
Perfect. Thank you very much for bringing that forward. On to item 9, appoint ad hoc budget subcommittee.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair and board members. Again, Samir here. So this item is it's a critical component of the district's annual budgeting process. Just to remind the board again a bit about the process, there is under the government code, we are required to recommend the budget for presentation to the board for adoption by June 30th of every year. And so what that means is that we actually have 2 official hearings on the budget. We have the May public hearing, which has to be at least it has to be that 30 days before the June hearing, essentially. So we have the May hearing, which is a public hearing to take comments on the budget, and then with no action at that time. There's the June board meeting, which is when action is taken by the board. But one of the policies that your board has also adopted is having an ad hoc budget subcommittee formed to basically review the budget and to provide, any suggestions, and also ultimately make a recommendation to the larger board, basically inform the process before you hit those two hearings that are the official part of the budget process.
Get to watch paint dry 2 times.
So it's a very extensive presentation because we do go through the entire budget. The item here is to ask the board chair essentially to appoint a subcommittee. I wanted to remind the board of who the subcommittee members were last year, as you think about volunteers, and hopefully get this subcommittee appointed. We got Chair Chiesa, Councilmember Bessinger, Supervisor Rickman, Supervisor McCauley, Supervisor Robinson, and Dr. Pacheco Warner were on the subcommittee this last year. And so I think one of the things that the chair in the past has also looked at is for relatively new board members, it may also be an opportunity for
funny you said that because sticking with tradition, all absent board members and new board members always get stuck on there.
And I'm just summarizing some of the traditions that I think we've seen with the board.
So it is truly an in-depth, and for member Nguyen, I truly mean it. It's a little time consuming because it takes a few hours to get over it, but it is. I've done it 2 or 3 times now. And it was insightful for me and a learning experience. So I don't want you to, and I don't want to chase you off either. So hopefully it's something you might want to participate in. So I'm going to definitely, the vice chair, if she has the time, I think it would be good instead of the chair this year, because, and just on motion. And then the people that didn't serve last time, generally, so it'd be Dr. Sheriffs instead of Dr. Pacheco Warner. There. I'm trying to think, and now I'm looking. Now I just said some names. Now I'm trying to do regional proximity. So it's going to be down in Bakersfield. You guys, the 2 of you, can sit there and hash it out without your speaker on, and tell me in the Bakersfield office.
I see Councilmember Reyna did raise his hand.
Yeah.
So I think he's indicating.
And then up in Modesto, Rickman.
Hey, I think Rosa would be awesome at it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, she's not here to make her do.
So how many members do
And
we
she's
have
new.
right now? Yeah. That's a good point.
Yeah, we have 5 total. I think 5 or 6 is probably about a good.
So we're at 5 right now?
We're at 5.
So then we're going to add.
Oh, Prescott. I'm sorry, Mayor, we also, how many is that total then? That's 6 total. So I think that's a good number right there. Can you, Morgan, if you don't mind summarizing those names?
Councilmember Lewis, Councilmember Nguyen, Dr. Sheriffs, Councilmember Reyna, Councilmember Scutia Braton, and Mayor Preciado.
Sounds perfect to me. Yeah, and there's no action necessary. It's ad hoc and appointed by us. Thank you very much. On to item 10, a verbal report on California Air Resources Board activities. And hopefully you have something.
Yeah, so the item is included in the packet. I'm happy to try to answer questions, but unfortunately, Dr. Pacheco Warner couldn't make the meeting today. No presentation on this item.
Okay, so if no questions, move on to the Executive Director report, item 11. Take your time, you're fine.
Apologies. I just wanted to first thank all the board members for all of your ongoing support on many fronts. You've all been really great about supporting different activities that have been going on up and down the valley. So appreciate all that support. We were out, just a quick report. We were out at the World Ag Expo this week. I heard it was maybe the biggest one ever. I don't know, maybe Supervisor Shuklian or Councilmember Lewis, who also was there this year, can maybe report out a little bit on that. But it was a great opportunity for us to connect face to face with just hundreds of stakeholders in the agricultural community to talk about our grant programs, the various things that are coming, kind of their way, and hear from them also on how we could be better supporting them in the various transitions that are going on. So we had a really productive engagement with them there. And I just want to, again, huge thanks to the governing board members who were there. And I know a couple of you, including Supervisor Shipley and Councilmember Lewis, actually you dropped by the booth and said hello to the staff, and just really appreciate you guys providing that support. And just wanted to note that I will be in Sacramento next week to handle a couple of things that are going on there, but we'll be focused on advocating on various budget priorities, and just continuing to try to make sure our Valley priorities are communicated in this process. And I'll stop there and turn it back to you, Mr. Chair and board members, for any questions.
Any questions, comments? So before I go to board comments, I got to tell a funny story, and this is my mea culpa, but the vice chair had sent me a text saying, "Hey, I'm going to the World Expo. Do you have Amy's number?" And I sent a text back, "Amy who?" I know, unbelievable. I sat and thought. So I always like to sell myself out. She said Shuckley, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. I'm sorry.
It's all right.
Any board comments?
It'll come back
in. No. Seeing no board comments. So, there it came late. Member Lewis, Vice Chair Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I'd like to welcome Liz Wynn to the board, and this is going to be a wonderful experience. For me, I keep telling Samir, this is a vacation for me to come here. So, a lot of work, a lot to learn. I think in the 6 years, if you get reappointed, you'll never know it all, but we have a great staff that knows a lot of what needs to be known, and in my opinion, they know it all. So welcome.
Thank you.
Yes, I had my first opportunity to attend the Tulare World Expo, Ag Expo, and I've served on the Merced County Fair Board for several years, and fairs are certain sizes in different communities, but this was ginormous. But I had the VIP treatment, and I didn't have to walk. I didn't have to walk. My feet didn't hurt. They weren't swollen. And thank you to Supervisor Sheklian for making me a VIP. And this lady knows everybody in Tulare. There wasn't a person there that she didn't know.
Except Vito doesn't know me, but but he's Stanislaus County, so I'll get up there.
So it was a great experience. Thank you, Samir, for making it possible for me and to your staff. And also thank you for these wonderful chairs. I have to tell you, I didn't have to bring my booster seat this week. And with our old chairs, because I have long legs, when I sat in them, my knees would hit the front of the dais. So now my legs are swinging in the air, and I'm happy. And they're very, very comfortable. So thank you all for making this possible for the board. We sit up here for somewhere between 3, sometimes 4 hours if it's a long meeting. And it's good to have some comfort when you're sitting up here. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Beth. Thanks for your comments. Member Pereira.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to take a quick moment to welcome Ms. Wynn from the office in the north.
Perfect. Member Robinson.
I just want to welcome my Visalia neighbor, and also my condolences to Chairman's mother-in-law.
I create my own problems.
You're winning a lot of points today.
I know. What's the book? Making friends and winning people over or something. Not me. All right. I see nothing else. And we do have a closed session.
Yes, sir. We have a closed session on the Air District versus Set Pistachio of Terabella, pending in Tulare County Superior Court, case number PCU 298746. And before we call for public comment, Supervisor Shiklian would like to make a statement.
On advice of council, I will be recusing myself from participating in item 13 as I have received campaign contributions from Set and Pistachio in the last year.
Thank you. And we do need to call for public comment on item 13.
Okay, Bakersfield, do you have any members of the public that would like to comment on item 13?
No comment from Bakersfield.
Thank you. Modesto, do you have any members of the public to comment on this item?
No public comment in Modesto.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public in Fresno that would like to comment? Seeing none, and then online.
Thank you. We will move into closed session now.
And do we expect a report out?
Yes, we do.
We do. All right. Thank you all for attending out there and the listening public. Thanks.
You know, something's wrong with the toilet. Don't take too long. I'm hungry. Buddy.
It will save you some.
Buddy, don't ask
Amy,
a lot
no
of
lunch
questions.
for you.
I'm hungry.
No lunch
No,
for
there's
you.
always leftovers.
Hey.
Any reportable actions taken in closed session will be provided to the clerk of the board, which will be available to the public upon request. And thereafter, the board adjourned the meeting at 11:57 p.m. or a.m., 11:57 a.m., excuse me. Do I need to redo it? Okay, I was just advised by staff that my report was on privacy settings for a bit, so I'm going to repeat my report, and that is that the board met in closed session on item 13, and a written summary of the reportable actions taken in closed session will be provided to the clerk of the board, which will be available to the public upon request. And thereafter, the meeting was adjourned.